You're watching Meet the Media, and today, of course, we are discussing how the media fares in terms of gender and sexual minorities reporting. I wonder whether there are easy fixes. I mean, there seldom are institutionally in terms of how the media works. But Beth, maybe we'll start with you. If you had a magic wand in the color pink or whatever you want to choose, what would be things that you'd like to see done differently in terms of how the newsrooms think about sexual minorities in the way in which they portray sexual minorities in different genders?
I think maybe media should not be thinking at all about sexual minorities as a separate people, as a separate group of people. I think that would be my magic wand, because then the reportage would be on, oh, another human being has been murdered. Who are they? And give us a little bit more than just, oh, a lesbian.
But isn't there,
has been murdered,
right? I mean,
you know?
Yeah, but then how does that play out practically though, Carl? Because on the one hand, as Bev and I were discussing before the show this morning, in a sense, what your ultimate desire in terms of true equality is to live in a society where your sexual orientation, your gender is so unremarkable that this doesn't have to be a program. But in order to get there, we're not going to see stories that will tell us about what Bev had for breakfast this morning and don't mention or foreground gender or sexual orientation. So how do you, on the one hand, get the LGBTI community to be utterly banal in terms of how they are portrayed, but on the other hand, the truth, of course, is there is a lot of violence, there is a lot of discrimination, so it's a hard balancing act.
It is. Like, I do agree with Bev in part. Like, I do think that there shouldn't be too much of a separation between, but I do think that it needs to be just the way in which it is covered, in which we are covered, is it should be more, I don't know, it just shouldn't be as I don't know.
I know what you're saying.
No, but Carl, you're never going to persuade your editor to, you know, if you go to your editor and you say, listen, the best thing we can do for sexual minorities is actually to show that they're utterly dull, just like straight people are. Can we actually just write a story about this person who happens to be gay and also is just a mediocre poet? You know what I mean? From a strategy point of view, it's lovely to show the full spectrum of the humanity and the interest of the LGBTI community. But that's not going to sell a newspaper. That's not going to get people to go and watch Bev's next film. On the other hand, if you talk to us about the LGBTI community and faith, institutionalized homophobia in the church, unfortunately, when you problematize the community, that is also easier to sell, to get people to come to the film festival and come and watch your work.
Well, absolutely. Look, we understand and we know that media is, you know, they have to sell newspaper. You have to sell your content, whatever that is, and it has to be somewhat sensational, but not always, not all the time. And it does not all have to be problematic in order to be on the front pages. Unfortunately, we're finding ourselves as people, I think, generally speaking, kind of living on the margins of panic. And that panic is being fueled by how the media reports what they do, you know.
And let's bring in Simone here, guys, also. Cape Town is also part of the country, Shame. Simone,
right? Simone.
Simone, I want to bring you in here. You were nodding vigorously in agreement with Beth's first response. Do you share the idea that perhaps, I don't know, we get too anthropologized as an LGBTI community? Okay, well, I think we've just lost her there. But, you know, that's kind of interesting because in your own work, however, though, Bev, I mean, isn't that part of, sadly, what we also have to archive and keep tabs on? Sorry, Carl, I think you wanted to jump in there before we went to Cape Town.
Yeah, sorry, I think it just comes back to my previous point, which was the three narratives, the main narratives that the media plays in. I think we just need more nuanced coverage of, do you know what I mean, of when in covering LGBTIQ people and our issues. So it's not another lesbian was murdered. It's like, you know, there are lesbian organizations working with church bodies saying in rural areas, can we not get coverage of that, like some good news stories, do you know what I mean?
I want to move on to a slightly different question. Who tells the stories? Obviously, if you're a member of the LGBTI community, there's a certain lived reality and experience that you bring to your work, Bev, you know, and Carl. But do you think that's important in terms of also who covers the beat? Did Mail and Guardian ask you, so who do you like, boys or girls, before you got this job?
No, I think it is very important. In fact, I remember at that discussion after the Q&A after your film screening, I mentioned how a trans woman had once told me that I'm careerist because I'm covering trans stories, even though I'm an ally, you know, and that really, I took offense to that, but she
But
had
you understand
a point.
where she was
exactly.
coming from, yeah.
So I met with my foundation on Friday, and we're hopefully going to be training, upskilling a
But it's interesting because it cut both ways. On the one hand, you want to empower the community to tell their own stories.
Yeah.
On the other hand, part of what we're fighting, Bev, is of course precisely to break the back of heteronormativity. We're not going to do that if we don't also have people who self-identify as straight interested in the stories
in
of
the
LGBTQ
story.
community.
But then if they are interested, right, they would have to be not only interested in just covering the story, but interested in the lived experiences, because we wouldn't be needing this particular initiatives if there was a more fair coverage of anything that we do, and not just
coverage.
10 seconds,
sincere,
Bob.
absolutely, and sincere coverage.
Absolutely. 10 seconds.
10 seconds what?
Oh, you agreeing?
Yes.
Just putting on stamp.
No,
No, for sure, for sure.
That's all we have time for, guys. But I really love your work. I love what you're doing in the Mail and Guardian. And Bev, we're looking forward to the next film out when? Next year?
Thank you, thank you. Early next year, January, there's 2 films coming out.
Right.
One on the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and how they deal with sexual orientation. And the second one is called Queer People of Faith, Queer Voices of Faith. And yes, gay people can also be Christian and Muslim and people of faith. We love God.
Stuff.
So,
Thanks for your work and thanks
you
for
so
coming
much.
on.
Thank you.
I'm afraid that is all we have time for this morning on Meet the Media. Thank you so much for your engagement with the show at home as well as on our digital platform, and for, of course, using the hashtag Meet the Media. Thank you so much. Have yourselves a wonderful week ahead.